Well, welcome everybody to the March Campus Ministry Business Forum Luncheon. My name's Ben Gates, and I direct campus ministry here at Purdue University Fort Wayne and also down the street at Indiana Institute of Technology. This is a monthly luncheon that we do where we invite a local CEO or entrepreneur or director or someone in the business world to come and have lunch with our students and talk about life experience, principles for success in the marketplace, the importance of integrity and ethics, and all sorts of issues that are pertinent to, hopefully, blossoming careers for these young people once they graduate. So I'm thrilled today that Deb Beck with Thrivent Financial Group is here with us. And I'm going to read a little bit of her background, and sadly I have to read it because I haven't memorized it yet, so I apologize for that if you're watching. But let me tell you about Deb. She joined Thrivent in February of 2010 as a financial representative and then became a financial consultant shortly after, the lead financial consultant in 2014, and became a partner with Thrivent in 2015. She was named the 2015 Divisional Volunteer of the Year, and remains faithful to her desire to practice generosity through her work. Prior to Thrivent, Deb enjoyed over 13 years raising 3 children, but was anxious to enter the, quote, official workforce. Although parenthetically, I'm sure she would say the most important job she's ever done is raising those kids. I think so. But at any rate, has joined the official workforce after a successful career with both General Electric and Grainger as a sales engineer. She's a 1985 graduate of Purdue University, and we found out in talking to her, she actually did finish her last semester here. What was, I don't even think it was IPFW at that point. It was, the I and the P were still separate. A little bit like they are now. But she did her last semester here before graduating from Purdue, and holds a certificate level training in situational sales negotiation, business leadership training, and individual leadership training. She and her husband live on Coldwater Lake in Lower Michigan, up in the lake area in Fremont. She attends Peace Lutheran Church there, and she and her husband are married 34 years and have 3 children, Emily, Carrie, and Michael. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite Deb to talk to those who have come today, just to give a little bit of her background and whatever she wants to share, and then we're going to open it up to a time of question and answers, and you get to enjoy and watch the whole thing. So thank you for joining us today. Yep.
Thank you, and it's great to see young faces and excited young faces, and a lot of you are in finance. We had an opportunity to chat during lunch. That's an exciting career. Accounting also, you'll have a lot of encounters with folks that are in the finance area. Thrivent Financial, for those of you that don't know what we do, we are a financial services firm, but we really cater to the Christian marketplace, if you want to call that a market. We call it a community, but you might call it a marketplace. It's one of the only Christian financial services firms, or have a membership organization of Christians. So to become a part of our organization as a client member, you actually have to be Christian. So it's very different in the marketplace. We are a lot like every other financial services firm, the Edward Jones or the Merrill Lynch's or the Charles Schwab. We do a lot of the same work, but our emphasis is really on generosity. My business model has a lot to do with charitable planning. So when you see buildings with names on them, that's a lot of the stuff that financial planners do. They help people get from point A to point B with their money, so they're connecting their faith and finance, so they're not, so their priorities match and their goals in life match with what they're doing here. More of a eternal perspective, I guess, than a temporal one, but that's kind of how we approach our business. I came to work for Thrivent 10 years ago. Like Ben said, I enjoyed a long time with my kids. I worked for General Electric. And back then, and I will say in the 80s, we didn't have Windows, for example. We were still on DOS computers, okay? So there was a lot of extra work, I'm going to say, just trying to keep up with your job. So you always had to be there, right? We didn't have this thing called work at home because we just didn't have the technology to work at home. We didn't have we didn't even have cell phones. We still had bag phones back in the early 80s. Fax machines were on paper that was thermal paper. We didn't have the typical way of conferencing communication like Zoom or Skype that you're familiar with. So none of that stuff existed. I wanted to stay home because I had 3 kids under the age of 5, I think, at that point. And GE actually said, we want you to stay home. We'll want to try this. So I was probably one of their first people that had this flexible thing called work at home. It was very, very difficult, though, because of the technology gap. And I pretty much spent more of my time in Fort Wayne than I did at my house anyway. So I finally said, that's just not working out with my family. And we parted very graciously, obviously, but it just that I had a different goal at that period of my life. Interestingly enough, today, it's so much easier, right, to work from home, and there's so many more opportunities that you can do when you want to raise a family and still have a career. It was a little more difficult back then, and it was just something that I chose to separate. When I decided to come back to the workforce, though, I couldn't go back to GE. They're not even really here anymore. And so my husband was the one that said, you've got this kind of brain that seems like it would work well in the financial area, math. That was my strong suit, science. And I said, there's no way I'm going to do that. No way. Never say no way, right? So I went and talked to this company called Thrivent, of which we were a member for years. We had our own product through Thrivent. And I went only because my husband thought I should, but I had no intention of doing this for a living. And I went in there and told him that. When I went to my interview, I said, you can talk all you want, but here's how I see it. And I felt like the industry was, I don't know what I want to call it. It was just yucky. There was a lot of baggage associated in the financial planning industry. And so I said to them, no. Now, unfortunately, there were 3 of them and 1 of me during the interview. And slowly but surely, they started to describe the difference that Thrivent had in the marketplace and how we do connect faith and finance and how we do take this generosity theme throughout our financial planning. Boy, did that grab me. I thought, man, if I can do that for a living, because I always volunteered. I was always the one doing stuff. When you talk about community, they could say, hey, Deb, go do this or figure out this. I was the one going out and doing those things. So I thought, wow, I could do that and work and actually get paid, get money. That'd be fun. And that's what I set out to do. Little did I know that I could even do this. I honestly thought I was going to fail. I figured it wouldn't be long where I couldn't get clients, because I didn't know anything about this stuff. I'm a fast learner, so that was helpful. I could pick things up readily, easily. However, I thought for sure nobody would trust me, because why would they? I was new in the industry, right? Like you guys are going to be, because you're going to be young, and I was a little bit older, so I had some life experience behind me, but I really didn't have the expertise behind me. And plus, I had to go take all the tests, right, and get your Series 7 and get your 66, which those are long exams. I think one is 6 hours. So for me to go back to studying and passing, and I did it. So I kept saying to myself and to God, well, God, if this is where you're leading me and I pass the test, now maybe that's the sign. So if I go to the interview and I like it, that's a sign. If I take the tests and I pass them, that's a sign. Well, sure enough, I kept doing all these things. Lo and behold, my first year, it was very successful. And I honestly have no idea how that happened except for the grace of God, because it wasn't me. There was no way, because I didn't have it. I didn't have anything. I just had the desire to do something for the community that allowed me to let my passion for people show through. And so, lo and behold, that just success kept going, and pretty soon, Thrivent had me doing some really fun things, and it just kept moving forward. And then I accepted a leadership position as a partner, and so on and so forth. Now I'm back to financial consulting because that's where my love is. I love to be with one-on-one with clients and helping them shape their financial journey and watching it all unfold and knowing secretly in my heart, it's all that stuff you can treasure up and say, that's going to happen someday because of the work that we've done. So that's what brought me here. That's what's keeping me here. And I'll probably do this as long as my brain allows me to do that. So if God's good and I can do this for a long time, I will. That's about it. It's a very uneventful life for me. Any questions?
Could you tell us what you do if you're meeting with a prospective client, and how you go about doing, or who those clients might be, how you might find them, and then what your role is with respect to Thrivent?
Yeah. So a lot of the way I find clients is referral, because if you do a great job and people trust you, they're going to give your name out. That's just, bar none, that is probably the best way that you can advance your career in getting clients as a sole entrepreneurship, sole proprietor. We do a lot of workshops and things like that to educate the public, and that's another way, another avenue that we can gain entry to get clients. When I meet with clients one-on-one, I'm there to listen. I need to learn about them. They don't know me, I don't know them, so I spend a lot of time just listening. I listen to their goals and their objectives. Sometimes if they're kind of closed and they don't want to open up, it does take a little bit of time to try to describe maybe my family and the walk that I've been on, to allow people to open up to, okay, so now this is me and my family. But once you start hearing people's stories, the plan is there. You just have to help them organize the plan. So it's really organization, I think, is the big key with financial planning. We all use the same stuff, right, to do financial planning. Same math, it's the same math behind everything. You just have to be a really keen observer of what that family wants and needs. Sometimes they keep it into themselves and they don't open up because they're afraid. Fear is a big factor when you're meeting with clients. So if you can break that fear down with people, usually they start to talk and they start to kind of spill out what that might look like. And then if you are gifted in organizing their finances in such a way that it optimizes things or it's more efficient and you can do more than you thought, that's a huge win. And that's usually what brings more clients back into my office, because they say, hey, I was talking to this person and you started to talk about this with them. Could you talk a little bit about that with me? So that answer that.
Are your clients, you said the referrals are a primary or heavy way of getting clients.
Right.
Are they people who are families who have not ever had a financial advisor, or are they switching from, let's say, Schwab or some typical firm to Thrivent?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and it's a mixture of both. There are many, many people that have never experienced sitting down with a financial advisor, and as young as you guys are, you need to sit down with a financial advisor. okay? You might think to yourself, well, I don't have finances, I don't have money. What does it matter? Sit down with a financial advisor and talk with them. You will someday, right? You will have means. You will be moving through the workplace. You will have resources. The earlier you get started, the better off that you're going to be. There are many advisors too that are in your demographic, right? So it's easier for you guys to relate to one another. My demographic obviously is a little bit older, but I still see clients, I see their kids, they'll refer their kids to me. And it's interesting too, because before I got here, I talked to my 28-year-old and my 25-year-old, and I said, hey, I'm going to IPF, or that's not IPFW anymore, isn't it? Purdue Fort Wayne. And I said, I'm going to be talking with some students there. What do you think I should talk about? And they said, talk about investing early and how much more you can have later. And I thought, well, that's classic for my kids to want a lot of cash when they're older, and that's the way their minds are working. So I thought, well, okay, so a typical example of that, between the ages of 20 and 30, and that's 10 years, right? So if you save $5,000 a year in that 10 years, and let's say you earn 10%, I know that's a little high right now, but you'll have about 1.5 million when you're done. And you only saved between 20 and 30, right? In those 10 years, $5,000, that's it. Now compare that to a person that's going from 30 to 60. That's 30 years of $5,000. They'll have less than the person that saved $5,000 from 20 to 30. Why? It's called compound interest, and that's like the ninth wonder of the world. And I know you guys know what compound interest is. So if you're not allowing yourself that opportunity when you're young, you're making, I think, a huge error in the calculation. And so then what it says is, well, I don't have that money, Deb. A lot of people say, well, I don't have that money. Well, then we kind of fall back on those biblical principles that are tried and true. They don't change ever. They are eternal. They're always the same. You have to spend less than you make, okay, right? Spend less than you make. You gotta give, right? And you have to save long term. And you gotta pay your taxes, right? You gotta pay debt. And then obviously you're gonna have a little bit of debt, but you always have to keep debt to a minimum. And if you live within those 5 basic principles, you actually will have the money. It doesn't matter how much money you make. That's not the marker. So don't always say, well, when I make more, I'm going to save more, or I'm going to give more. That's not how it works. So if you live within those 5 basic principles, you will maintain a life that's honorable and worth. You're not going to have that financial stress around you. I see Ernest saying yes.
I'm hoping that these students just give you questions.
Do we have one? Okay.
Right. So what I want to know is, every morning when you're ready to go to work, what is the one thing that motivates you to want to leave the house, go to work with a smile?
That is an awesome question. I am not short on joy, first of all and foremost, okay, because I'm not cynical. I have not decided to be cynical, okay, so that's number one. However, outside of that, I know that the next client that I meet, when we are finished, and I don't know when that will be, whether that's the first appointment or the 50th appointment, but I know somewhere between the first and the last, they will give more. I know they will, because I've seen it. Because we start planning, right? We start planning. So my motivation in the morning is knowing that I have helped people that these institutions were built on those gifts from other people, right? Charities are being helped. They survive based on the gifts of other people. And if I can have a little tiny impact on that dynamic, that gets me up every morning. So thank you for that question.
You mentioned that in your introduction that there was some yuckiness in the world of financial planning. Can you elaborate on that? What are some of the problems in the industry?
I think moral relativism is probably one of the biggest ones that comes to mind. You can do the right thing, right? And not to say that something is wrong categorically. However, are there better ways of doing things that are less injurious to people, or that cost less, or that the, quote, salesperson isn't making more commission on? There's a lot of pitfalls in the industry. It is what it is. When 2008 rolled around and you saw those financial firms collapse, it's because they made choices. And again, moral relativism, right? Was it right or wrong? Most of the stuff wasn't, quote, illegal, right? But it shouldn't have been done. And so my purview in 2010 was that. I thought, oh, there's no way I'm going to get into this industry because it's dog eat dog, cat eat cat. However, my husband reminded me that you need to be the change agent. What are you doing? What are you thinking? So that's what I decided to do. And so when you're making these judgments on moral relativism, okay, so that's a whole nother, this is the mom in me talking. And you're thinking through right and wrong, you have to have a really strong kind of intellectual integrity, and it's almost a math problem, right? On how you deduce what is the right thing or the wrong thing to do. And if that because the math problems, they don't change either, right? Just like I said, the biblical principles don't change. Don't change, ever. So now if you have the same math problem, and you're working through your dynamic to make a decision using that same methodology, right? You should be coming up with the same answer if you've got the criteria in which you're making those decisions, okay? So when you're young, you've got to decide for yourself, what are my criteria? Where's the line in the sand? How am I going to figure these problems out? Because every problem is different, and you're going to be encountering them at all levels of organizations, and it doesn't matter. The best organizations still have bad things, right? It's just because they're people. These are human beings making decisions. So it's up to you guys to have that intellectual integrity where you can say, this applies to this situation and thus it applies to this situation. Because if you know how you're making decisions, you'll have a much easier time later in life trying to maneuver through all of the things that are going to be thrown at you. And there will be a time when you're going to have to make decisions that you're going to say to yourself, I don't know. I don't think I agree. I don't think this is right. I don't know how to handle this, right? And so you've got to have that same kind of architecture in your decision making so it can apply to everything in your life, not just family. Has to apply to work, has to apply to your community. Kind of a long way around that question, but did that?
Yeah, in fact, just to follow up on that, I don't know much about the world of financial planning, honestly, other than being someone who has been a recipient of the services. And so I don't exactly know how financial consultants are compensated. But it seemed to me in some of the experiences I've had that working with certain financial consultants, it seemed like the same instrument was being suggested. rather than a diversity of options. And it gave me the impression that maybe this was how this particular person was being compensated. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, if you're working with a financial consultant, is it important for that person to have a wide range of tools to work with, as opposed to maybe just a few?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I on the right?
Yeah, no, I understand where your question's coming from, and that does happen. A few years ago, we had the Department of Labor came out and said that all financial advisors have to be fiduciaries. This was kind of outside the SEC, and I think they took more liberty than they probably should have, but it changed our industry. So we had all of the very large, we're about 321 on the Fortune 500. We're a huge financial services firm. We're the only not-for-profit financial services firm on the Fortune 500, okay? We took great pains to work through the Department of Labor's regulation on commission and other things that were in that statute. And it never came to be. It never really ended up passing, right? However, we made so many changes based on the fact that the Department of Labor felt that the financial industry was taking advantage of people, right? And so that's what created it. Now, I bet you we spent, I don't know how much we spent, but I bet it was in the tens of millions preparing for the Department of Labor changes. And this was every financial services firm that was preparing for this. To have all of the stuff that you need to help somebody move on their financial journey, it takes a lot of stuff. It takes a lot of different products. It takes, sometimes, like for myself, I enjoy the financial planning piece. If I could just do financial planning for a fee, which I do, but if that's all I did, if I didn't have to place product, that's what I would do. Because I love giving people, I like taking the puzzle pieces and putting them together in such a way that it makes sense. It makes better sense. But that's why you saw an over propensity of folks using maybe one thing and not a variety of things because it was how they were being paid. And that's what led me to say no initially. That's not what I want to do. But again, I didn't have to, did I? Right? I don't have to. I have to be like the industry, right? Be myself. And it worked. So.
I have tons of questions I could ask. I'm waiting for them to jump in. Do you want a negative or a positive question?
Whatever you want, you throw it at me.
Ben? Here's a negative question.
Okay.
You know the phrase, what would Jesus do, or WWJD? I'm not a big fan of those bracelets. I won't look see who's wearing them. But one reason I don't care for them is that I feel they're kind of glib, as if that you can just show your bracelet or your abbreviations that answers everything. But often Christians don't behave the way they say they should behave. They don't pay their employees very much, and then they talk about how we should be loving towards each other. Or when they're small business owners and they decide it's time to make cuts, they just let people go and don't offer anything that you would think they should. Or they own small factories. I've seen this personally, and I'm an attorney. And then they will call themselves employees, right, to skirt the tax requirements. So often poor people are taken advantage by Christian business people. So my question to you is, how do you avoid taking a mantle that you're a Christian financial advisor so that you're not using that as a light that just simply blinds out what people should really see of what you do that's actually helpful? Because every person is a victim of someone else, and I'm a capitalist, but every person is a victim of someone else, doesn't think they're going to be a victim of someone else. Mm-hmm. And so everyone says, I'll take care of you. And Adam Smith, who created our concept of free market, I mean, Karl Marx invented capitalism as a word, but Adam Smith, who we all love when it comes to free market, Adam Smith talked about how the rich oppress the poor. He wrote about that in The Wealth of Nations, that the rich oppress the poor. And he talked about payment and rents that rich people charge poor people to live in places. So I guess my question for you is, how do you as a Christian avoid looking like somehow you've got this glib shield, like I'm a Christian financial advisor, therefore fill in the blank,
Yeah.
that what you're doing is actually showing integrity?
I think-
Have you ever told someone, I don't think you should be my client because of this, or I don't think you need this because of this reason, that you've turned down income for the benefit of someone else? Is my question.
Excellent questions. Okay, so there was a bunch of them in there
Yes.
actually. So we'll start with the Christian mantle thing, right? So I do think that that's a tough one, because when you're out there professing that you are a Christian business person, that's a whole nother level of responsibility. Okay, now how does the industry actually oversee that situation? I'm a certified kingdom advisor. Okay, what does that mean? You can look it up on the internet, but a certified kingdom advisor is somebody that's been through rigorous training for kingdom advice and has shown in their personal life the ability, right, to be giving, that volunteers their time, that the pastor endorses, right, which is a hard thing for pastors to do. So you have to get all of these letters of recommendation from clients. Does it necessarily disallow the bad person from entering? Nope. Because people are people, sin is sin. It's going to be there, right? But, however, I will always say that to the level at which you profess your Christianity with clients, subtly or overtly, it's the individual, right? I have individual responsibility for the people that I serve. I have individual responsibility. I cannot change the people that have gone before me or that will come after me and create havoc in the system. I can't change it. Staying in my lane, that's a whole nother topic, especially for you guys. I can't fix the world's biggest problems. I cannot, okay? Because I don't have the influence to fix. You guys might have the influence someday to fix the biggest world problems, okay? You might. However, along the way, before you get there, before you have that much influence to fix the world's problems, you have a lane, okay? Please stay in your lane. Do what you can in your lane, meaning when I'm meeting with my clients one-on-one and I'm providing them the best client service model I can, I am doing what my objective is and my mission and my goal and my business. And I have to do it within the biblical principles that I have been taught. I can't do it outside of that. I don't know how, frankly, to separate what I do in my personal life or what I do versus what I do in my business. I can't separate it. So I can't really not hold out the Christian mantle because it's kind of like it's my arm, it's part of me, it's who I am, but I have a responsibility to it, okay? As far as the rich oppressing the poor, this is a topic where I've seen, at least in our industry, where you can take advantage of people. I've seen it because there's people that don't have the level of education, or maybe they're just agreeable people, right? And you realize, wait a minute, I think they're just saying yes. They don't really understand it. They don't know what other alternatives there may be. So as a financial planner, if I'm not giving them 2 or 3 alternatives, then I'm not doing my job, right? Because that would be wrong. That would be kind of steering people into doing something that may not be at their best interest. And as a fiduciary, as a financial planner, you are held to account to do what's in the best interest of that client. Again, are there bad people even as a fiduciary? I'm sure there are, right? But again, I'm staying in my lane. I'm doing what I do best. It's probably why there's a level of success there, right? Because I'm not doing maybe some of the horrible things that have been done before. But there can be, when you take middle class folks, that's all the money they have in the world, right? There's very little margin for failure there when you're a financial planner, because that's all they have, that's it. You can't really chop the buckets up any more than it's what you've got, right? And there's a very long period there where people may not have income because they're retired. Could be 30 years that you're living basically without a payroll check. And so it's very easy for predatory people to take advantage of that situation. You know? What's the solution? I don't know. DOL couldn't even figure it out. The Department of Labor couldn't figure it out. I do know, though, that when you're working for a company that has a set of ethics like we do, and we've won ethics awards year over year over year, that's important to me, right? So would I go to work? Well, you know all the financial firms that had problems after 2008.
One thing that struck me, if you think about Bernard Madoff, early in his career, his primary clientele were Jews, from Jewish people, not Israelis, but Jewish people from upstate where he was from. And so he was a Jewish man in a Jewish community getting Jewish clients. And they looked up to him and they trusted him. And he was a complete fraud.
Yep.
It's an astonishing thing. I'm not saying that that Christians wouldn't do such a thing. I'm saying is, how do you protect yourself, or does your firm protect itself from risking behavior that would go down that path?
And again, I think it's the certifications and the amount of time that we spend educating ourselves on what not to do, right? So if I'm a CKA, or if I've got certifications in retirement income planning, or if I've got CFP, there's a whole bunch of checks and balances there that I think help. Does it ultimately negate, or does it stop somebody coming in and ripping off? No, it's happened. It happens. Sin is sin, and it's terrible. But it is part of the world, right? Bad people are out there. However, you guys have a responsibility, and I have a responsibility. If there's a bad guy sitting next to me in my organization, right, I'm calling him out. I'm strong, and I'm courageous, and I can call him out. Have I called him out? Yes. And I will continue to do so. Why? Because I'm in my lane. If this guy's in my lane and he's doing the wrong thing, no, we need to remove you from this lane and get you in a more appropriate lane, because this is not for you. So it takes you guys to have courage when you get into a career instead of status quo, right? You have to have courage. And remember what I said about the intellectual integrity? If you don't have that cemented in your brain of what you will and will not do and how you will discern what the right thing is to do, you will make wrong choices. Guarantee you. And it happens, right? But you can take corrective action. But stay in your lane, help other people be better, right, that are in your lane. And if you've got really bad folks that are in your lane, you better, and if you know about it, you better do something about it. Because then your intellectual integrity, right, now you're doing the moral relativism, aren't you? So, does that answer it?
Yes. Can I ask you one question related to investment that maybe would apply to these guys who are wonderfully younger? In 2007, Warren Buffett made a bet that finally a billionaire hedge fund guy took with him, which was that $1 million bet who would make more money in the stock market in a 10-year period. The index funds or picking. And the billionaire hedge fund picker took the bet and lost dramatically. Okay? And then the money went to a charity in Oklahoma City. So if you're advising them and they want to invest $5,000 a year from their 20s to their 30s, and then, I know stopping isn't right, but if you're going to stop then if you start early. Would you advise them to simply index mutual fund their investments and leave it to time, or would you advise them to be more strategic, more individual in their
I would advise them on their own unique scenario. There's no answer to that question.
Okay.
Okay, it takes an advisor to learn about that client. So, for example, your index fund scenario. Well, you know what index funds do when the market goes bad, right?
Well, Warren Buffett was down 46% in
That's
2008.
right. Now, what if that human wasn't Warren Buffett, but it was Debbie worries all the time? Beck, right? What if it was her and she can't sleep at night, right? Is the index fund appropriate for her? I don't know. That's a question that you pose to your clients, right? Because that's the situation you don't want. There is no one solution set because humans are so different. Now, could Warren Buffett Jr. handle the index fund with a 44% drop in value? Could, yeah, right? Two different scenarios, two different solution sets. Make sense? Two different people.
What if they're all in their 20s?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That 20-year-old can be as worried about a market loss as a 70-year-old, right? If they're not sleeping at night, you shouldn't be sleeping at night because you did the wrong thing for them, right? Now, the logic, the math problem that you just told us about is true. That is, I mean, time, right, is your biggest help when you're young. So I'm not discounting what you're saying at all. However, I wouldn't approach any human being with a blanket statement, this is how you should invest, because it's really based on the individual's ability to handle that investment. Okay?
Earlier, before we began, I know you talked a little bit about, because campus ministry went on a trip to Bulgaria recently, and then you mentioned a little bit about some of your experience working with charities in foreign countries as part of your work as a financial advisor. I was just wondering if you could elaborate more on some of the work you've had to do with charities, and especially in foreign countries where perhaps not the ethics, but the regulatory laws and everything are a lot looser.
Yeah, it's been really tough actually. So I'm just now starting to deal with some folks that want to give money. For example, we talked about Nicaragua. I've got clients that want to give money to a church in Nicaragua, but it's been very difficult trying to find an avenue that can do that because Nicaragua, if you haven't been keeping up on the news, it's a very difficult place. In fact, about 2 years ago, there was a mass exodus out of Nicaragua. All the volunteers pretty much left. We used to do Habitat for Humanity with Thrivent. In fact, I've been to Nicaragua and a Habitat worldwide build. We removed ourselves. We couldn't go there because it is so dangerous to be there. So now when you're trying to get money from the U.S. to a foreign country that's so unstable, you almost put a mark on your back for whoever's there. So it's very, very, very difficult. We are just kind of encountering these new problems because of the world unrest, and we don't have any simple solutions right now. But it's very difficult. I've had clients strap money to their bodies where I'm saying, no, please don't do that. Don't take money to your body and take it into the country. I think that's dangerous. I've seen people, Western Union money. I think we talked about wire transfers and such. But wire transfers get kind of expensive, so if you're doing small sums of money. So there's so many different problems that occur. It's kind of scary, actually. And so when you're giving advice to people, right, and now it's almost kind of, I'm not going to say life and death, but there's some danger to it, right, because you're trying to decide what the safest way is to get money to a foreign country. It gets a little bit, you have to just to make sure that you're always looking out for the individual and not placing them in harm's way. But that goes without saying, no matter, right, what we're doing. But it's a tough one. No easy answer, sorry.
We've got about 7 minutes. Students, can I have questions? I'll ask one.
Just a general question, what's your view on the health of the stock market right now? Next 10, 15, 20 years, what are you thinking?
So it's $1 million question, right? Okay, so lots of things have been happening that haven't been happening before, right? One thing is we've had a pretty robust bull market for the last 10 years. Very unusual. Usually goes in 2 and 4 year swings, right? We haven't really had that. The difference is there was a ton of money that was kind of that sat idle in these companies for a long time after 2008, and that kind of got released, and so we're seeing this huge boom. I think the immediate future is pretty good. Recessionary pressures aren't really on us right now, and the Fed has declared that they're not going to come out and raise interest rates artificially again because we don't have inflation, right? So if those things persist and the job market and the GDP stay high, I see a continuation of the same, okay, from now for maybe the next couple of years. I was a little bit worried about some recessionary pressure at the end of this year, but we just don't see the inflation. And if the Fed doesn't do their thing, I'm not seeing it. Long term, do we look at the past to indicate our future? It's the only thing we have to look at. So I would say continue on, my friend, because it's the only system we have, and it's always worked. So for the young people in the room, and it is what it is, isn't it?
Can I ask you, other than, let's say, vice spending, that I think hopefully we can agree Christians shouldn't take part in, is there something that I would identify, you think in your experience, whether it's a single person or a family, a Christian single or family, something that identifies them with respect to their relationship to money that someone who isn't a Christian might not have association with, other than just let's try not to go gambling, let's avoid the lottery, and perhaps not invest in a marijuana company or something like that. Is there something relationally that Christians you see have in your years of experience have with money that's different?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Again, it falls back onto those biblical principles that we talked about money. More often than not, we don't have a debt issue. Right? If you're holding on to the biblical principles, you don't have a debt issue. The biggest crisis that we have right now, unfortunately, is debt in the U.S., right? And it's on all levels. The government doesn't even maintain their responsibility to debt. So we as Christians must maintain our responsibility to debt. And that includes student debt. It is a huge crisis. That'll be the next bubble, okay? And I don't even know how they're going to fix that one because it's a big problem. It's because it's mixed in with the government, it's mixed in with the private sector, right? So debt is the single biggest determiner, and if you truly are holding on to your Christian principles around money, that is the single best advice that I can give you is don't have debt. And then people say, well, if I don't have debt, how do I do this, or this, okay? So now you have to figure out your pie and what your debt is, what you're living, right? What you're willing to live on. So the other thing is that we have an epidemic society of spenders in the U.S. because we have everything. don't we? There's nothing you can't get here. You can get the next iPhone, you can get the next watch, the whatever, whatever, whatever. So it's just making a decision, what's my enough? And I think from a Christian perspective, you have to determine what your enough is. And I don't care whether you're a CEO or whether you're a student. Draw a line in the sand. This is my enough. If I can live, in fact, it's interesting at Thrivent, our CEO a number of years ago said, if you can't make this much as a executive at our company, then you don't belong here. They put caps on it. Okay? What is your enough? Figure that out. Because if you figure it out early, you're not chasing something that's unattainable and that will get you into debt and other trouble later. So that living piece, if you're living well beneath your means, and it's the same advice you hear from a Dave Ramsey or a Ron Blue or Money Matters. I don't know if you ever listened to that radio show, but these are very basic principles. The problem is nobody lives by them. So they haven't sat down and they haven't just diagnosed for themselves, what does my pie look like? What am I going to live on? What am I going to give? What do I owe in taxes? And what do I owe in debt? And once they figure that out, they can save for the future. And that's primarily the difference. I don't think it's necessarily not playing the lottery or what spending habits are. I don't think that's different. I think it's just they have not decided what's my enough. And I don't think it's Christian or secular, non-Christian. I think it's what's my enough. And if you're heeding to the biblical principles in finance, that's the number one question you have to answer for yourself when you're getting your budget around. What's my enough? When you finally say, after you graduate, and I remember back when I worked for GE, and I was probably making 14 grand in the 80s. In fact, that was the worst time to get a job back when I graduated in 85. I think unemployment was just excruciating. Interest rates were 11%, right? But if at that time you didn't say to yourself, okay, so I'm going to make this amount of money, and if I ever make this amount of money, right, then what? Well, if I ever make this amount of money, then what? Well, you can say that until the cows come home. So what you need to do is say, all I need is this amount. Now, you might not be there yet, okay? But when you go over that amount, then what? Does your giving increase, or does your living increase? That's a decision that you as a Christian have to come to terms with. And there's no right or wrong, so there's no condemnation. And when I'm working with clients, that's a big hurdle because nobody wants to be told they're doing something wrong or spending wrong. There is no right or wrong. You have to, for yourself, decide what your living piece of the pie is, right? Debt, what you owe in taxes. It's very simple, right? What you're willing to give, and then what you're willing to save for the future. And then it's easy, actually, after that.
We have time for maybe one question from the If not, anybody have a question?
Christine's been quiet.
Any questions?
So what's some advice that you would give to us who are about to go into the business world once we graduate?
Be yourself and stay in your lane. There's a lot of big problems out there, again, but if you can correct the ones that you have influence over, you'll always win. And never, ever, ever turn into a cynic, okay? Keep the joy. Wake up every day and hold on to the joy, because there's a whole world out there that's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's remarkable actually, right? But if you become cynical, that world kind of closes down on you, and you won't do as good a job as you could do if you held on to the joyful part and that optimistic part, that you can actually have an influence in changing what's around you, okay? So don't get so depressed that you can't change what's over here, right? You got to change what's right in your own backyard or your own front yard. And you'll go, people that have that ability shine, they just, you can just see it. You just know who they are, and those are the ones that get advancement.
Well, I hope you enjoyed watching with us today. We enjoyed the conversation. I thank you very much for coming to join us. We have one more of these business forum luncheons this semester. Jeff Hoffman, who is the owner of the Chick-fil-A store that just opened on Coliseum next to Glenbrook Mall, will be coming and talking about the whole world of fast food franchise and so forth. I think that'll be very interesting. And that particular presentation will be on Tuesday, April the 2nd. I think I have the right date. And once we videotape it, we'll put it up on this YouTube channel, and you can watch that one as well. So thanks again for joining us today, and have a great day. God bless you.